Welcome back, our Atlan PvPers. As promised, we are returning to bring you an update to your top 300 class distribution for solo PvP in Crystal of Atlan. We covered the first few days of launch rankings here in this video, so if you want to check that one out, you can, but we will share the data of the two samples pulled that we have here. Keep in mind that this information is based off of when we are doing this recording and when we have taken the sample pools. This stuff will literally change hour by hour. So what is seen here may already be different, but let's get right into it. And the first thing to talk about is our new class distribution representative, Gunners. There are 63 Gunners in the top 300. It is now the majority representing class in the top 300. As you can see, Starbreakers are still very closely represented, but last week it wasn't even close. Starbreaker was more than double any other class. There are 62 Starbreakers now. Still a lot of Starbreakers, but that's down 30 from where they were previously. So we talked about it. We said there would be some drop off on Starbreakers, and there was, but we're talking about Gunners first. Gunners, a lot of people have realized this class is just downright good. It has a lot of super armors like Starbreaker, but it gets to do everything from range. It can get close if it wants to, and some even do with very aggressive playstyles, but they can also keep their distance a lot of the time and still be able to fight off anything that is thrown their way. They have lots of tools for engagement, they have lots of super armor protections, and they have really good skills that they can use from the air that have auto targeting and make it difficult to track them and really get a gauge on the distance of how far away that they are. But yeah, I think people have just learned that Gunners just really downright good and oppressive, and so we've seen so many of them show up to the point that they are beyond the overwhelming majority in the top 50, which we moved top 50 from top 25 to get a bigger sample size for the top represented classes, and Gunners are there taking over 30% of the spots in the top 50. There are 15 Gunners in that top 50, and a lot of them you can even see are just right here in the top freaking 20. Even there's so many, there's so much green here. Which is just an insane thing to see for Gunners specifically. So a lot of Gunners right now, very good class, but that's not to say that their class counterpart, Bounty Hunters, aren't doing well either. There are 17 Bounty Hunters at this time. Could be more. I thought there would be a little bit more. There was a few more earlier in the week, but some of them got pushed off of the top 300. But like we said, these rankings are constantly changing, so in a day or two, there could be more on the board again, and then they could fall off again. But Bounty Hunters, there are 17 there with only 2 in the top 50. Bounty Hunter, I do think, is a very good class. I do think it is a little underrepresented on the leaderboards. I just think some people have a difficult time with the class's play style. It is a very aggressive play style. It does not have nearly as much super armor protection as the Gunner does, but it has really good tools for engagement and is able to be a very aggressive class overall and keep pressure on others, and has really good burst capabilities. But, it's a more difficult class to play. It's a different style of play for many. And so Bounty Hunters, I still think there's room to see more of them rise up on the ranks, in the coming weeks for this season of Crystal of Atlan. Zerkers still bringing it, and Disu is still here in those top 3. There's multiples of them right here, even in the top 10 representing. But, Zerker is still very well represented overall on the top 300. There's 21 of them, little bit less. There's a little bit less than there was last week. And some of that has to do with their own class counterpart. But Zerker, there are 6 Zerkers in the top 50, so very solid representation. 6 is the highest level of representation in the top 50, which means that's a good level of representation. Naturally, everything is low in comparison to Gunner, but 6 is a very good showing for a class in the top 50. There are 6 Zerkers there. but 21 overall in the top 300. However, I think some of that is that, Zerker's engagement tools are maybe a little more deterministic compared to some others. They're not as flexible. They're a little more direct. And so some people have learned how to play around Zerkers a little bit. And that's why there have been a few Zerkers that have fallen off. But, it might be more so the fact that their class counterpart, Magblades, have more than doubled their representation in the top 300. Maybe some Zerkers rolled off the Magblade. They just found it way more fun and, a little more versatile to play into. Magblades, there are 23 of them now. They had 11 last week. They more than doubled themselves. So, if anybody out there is telling you that Magblade is bad or it's weak or, it just isn't able to be, do well, they're lying to you. It's a very good class. We've even got one here in the top 3. Swordsmen currently hold 2 of the top 3 spots overall. So don't let anybody on a Magblade tell you that the class is bad. They're just coping and they want to think that their class sucks. But it really doesn't. Magblade is a very good class. They have multiple ways to engage you from the air. That is one of the things that Magblades do look to do, is go for aerial engagements, because they have good auto-targeting skills that have catch capability that they then combo into from, and they're able to just keep up pressure tirelessly. They have a lot of movement capabilities for their class. There's a lot of movement on that class, so they're able to be very aggressive and keep pressure on. If you go on the defensive, there's only a couple classes that can deal with playing very defensively or even at a low energy type of play. But Magblades are able to put out a lot of pressure. They have a lot of movement and they can close that distance very quickly. So very good class right now. A lot of people are learned how to play it. And so we are seeing much more Magblade representation. There are 4 in the top 50, which is a solid showing when compared to everything else. Magblades, don't sleep on them. Elementalist. This is the mage of the mages, and it is maging. There are 34 Elementalists in the top 300. We talked about how we weren't sure whether or not Elementalist was just previously being taken advantage of by veterans, but Elementalist is another one of those higher represented classes in the top 50. There are 6, just like Zerkers, and there are 34 overall in the top 300. So a lot of Elementalists are beginning to show up. I ourselves are beginning to see more of them in the matches that we're having. We weren't really fighting against them in the first week, but now we're seeing them a lot more frequently in those diamond lobbies, and it is really annoying to fight them. It is an annoying class to deal with. They have a lot of large AoE skills that do lots of damage, and some of them are able to have really annoying instant cast, no animation type stuff, particularly when used from the air. Meteor is annoying. I personally hate dealing with Meteor from Elementalists, but Elementalists are very much here to play. I think that we may even see more of them in the coming weeks showing up on the leaderboard. And they're just taking away from the other mage classes at this time, I believe, and that's why we're seeing some decreases in the counterparts. Magician is one of those mages that is suffering from what looks like a numbers fall off from that first week. There's only 14 magicians now being represented. So, I think some of those magicians maybe changed over to Elementalists, or they just changed off to another class altogether, or people have just learned how to fight against Magician. Maybe Magician was a better class at those lower levels, and it had a more complete kit compared to some other classes, but there's only 14 Magicians right now. We personally ranked Magician as the worst class on our tier list, and that was just because it didn't feel like there were many of them anymore. It felt like they had fallen off quite a bit. Maybe it's just that a lot of people don't know how to play them at a high level. But Magician felt like it was one of the easier classes overall to fight compared to the other mages at that time. Now, we do play things like Cloud Strider and Starbreaker, so Magician maybe is something that we have a good matchup into overall. But you know, it was one of those classes that I was beginning to see less and less of and have less issues with overall when fighting. But good magicians were still really obnoxious to deal with. Those bubbles are annoying as heck. But magician, you know, hopefully we see some more in the coming weeks. Warlock, a magician, there's only 3 of them represented in the top 50, so a little bit on the lower side there. Warlocks, though, are in still the worst spot of the worst spot for the mages. I actually think Warlock is better than Magician, but that is on a matchup-to-matchup basis. I think that Warlocks are currently struggling to rank up because they function really well as counter engagement classes. So classes that play very aggressively, look to get closer to you in order to deal damage. So your fighter classes, your swordsman classes, even bounty hunter. Bounty hunter likes to get really close. You know, those classes that like to get in that melee range type of deal. That is something Warlock plays really well into. But there's so much gunner representation and a high amount of elementalist representation as well that Warlocks maybe aren't able to make the most use of their kit in a lot of their matchups, and so they're having difficult times ranking up. The class is not bad by any means, but you know, it might just be the current state of PvP with the classes that exist that they're just having a difficult time. There's only one of them in the top 50, but 12 overall in the top 300. I definitely want to see some more Warlocks in the next week make their way into that top 300 leaderboard. I do think they're able to. But, you know, they're plagued just as much as Blade Maidens. Blade Maidens, there's only 12. But I think Blade Maidens is for a different reason. I think Blade Maiden is a much better class than Warlock. And I think it's a much better class than Magician. But there's only 12 Blade Maidens. And I think that is more so of a testament to a lot of people not really having interest in playing the class. They don't like the way the class plays, or they're having difficulty with learning how to play the class at an effective high level. You know, there's still good Blade Maiden representation, you know, in the higher rankings. There's 3 of them there. So, you know, there's multiple Blade Maidens in those high rank spots. You know, there's more of them than there are bounty hunters, but there's more bounty hunters overall than there are Blade Maidens. I think Blade Maiden is a better class when you're able to play it at a higher level. I think that Blade Maiden is one of the classes that has really high gap between skill floor and skill ceiling. And so a lot of the people who play Blade Maiden have a difficult time playing it at that high level, making use of their puppet, swapping places with it effectively, and really capitalizing on that long distance engage that Blade Maidens do have at their disposal. So Blade Maidens, I'm hoping that we see some more of them in the future. Definitely make their way into those top 300 spots. Scythe Guard, still really well represented. The class is doing just fine. It has a great versatile kit. It's able to play defensively. It's able to play offensively. You know, they do have an instant animation ranged engagement tool, which is just like this pillar of translucent energy that doesn't really have an animation at all. So that's an annoying one to deal with, but the class has a really strong grab as well. That was a good tool for counter engagements, for people that get close, you know, snagging people out of their super armors and stuff like that. But Scythe Guard is it's just a more direct play style compared to Blade Maiden, less reliant on puppet positioning and stuff like that. And so Scythe Guard is still much more represented. There's 26 Scythe Guards, with 4 of them in the top 50. So Scythe Guard doing just fine. They're right where we thought they'd be overall. Maybe a few more in the coming weeks, but they're right around where we believe that they would be. Cloud Striders are struggling. There are 16 Cloud Striders in the top 300, so more than some other classes, but they're the only class that is not represented in the top 50. And this could be for a variety of reasons. You know, maybe the people who were playing Cloud Strider at that high rating, because there was even one in the top 10 earlier in the week, just felt that it wasn't worth the effort. Maybe they felt that they just had to play so much harder in order to be able to win matches that they just didn't think it was worth the effort, so they stopped playing their Cloud Strider and it fell out of the rankings. But it's also possible that the person who was there, maybe they just stopped playing the game and they elo decayed out, because you have daily decay when you do get to those higher rankings, so you have to play games every day in order to not rank decay. So that's something to definitely keep in mind there. But I think Cloud Strider is a very versatile class. I think it can do a lot of cool things and has a lot of possibilities. However, it's very possible that it's a little bit of a skill ceiling issue for some with the element swap system and how using an ability can change what element you were in, and that can mess up your combo. But also, I think some people are learning how to play against Cloud Strider because you're able to know a little bit what skills maybe they're looking to engage with based on the element that they're currently attuned to. You know, when you see a Cloud Strider with water orbs around them, you know that they have access potentially to cranes, you know, their long distance skill to try and get a catch, or they have access to the mini ranged orb that they may use for a catch or for self on person use in order to like self peel for themselves. But also, you know that if they're in fire stance, you know, tiger stance, you know that you see those orange orbs. They're either maybe looking for an aerial, you know, rapid fire spread, looking to get a catch there that way, or they're maybe looking to drop the big megaton bomb on you for large damage. And so it's very possible that their playstyle is maybe just able to be anticipated a little bit more because of how their element mantra swap system works. But, you know, hopefully we see some more Cloud Striders show up again. It's a really fun class. I really enjoy playing it. I actually think I have more fun with it than my Starbreaker. And it's just unfortunate that there aren't more Cloud Striders represented overall. Your Starbreaker, their class counterpart, still very highly represented. There's 62 of them. There's still a lot of them. We knew there was going to still be a lot of them, but there's a lot that fell off. Starbreaker is represented with 6 in the top 50. So like Zerkers and Elementalists, it has the same representation there. But where we're seeing a lot of Starbreaker representation is in that bottom 200 to 300 range. That is the range where you're going to see the most class variants of things moving in and out of the ranks day to day. And so with there being such a large pool of Starbreakers, you're actually seeing a lot of just like Starbreakers replacing each other on the leaderboard, in and out of Plat and Diamond. So I think it's going to be interesting to see what the class representation looks like in the future, if our leaderboard ever gets to be in the point where it's all masters that are represented type of deal. But, you know, I still stand by it. I think that the skill floor and skill ceiling for Starbreaker is not very far apart. And so I think it is a class that is one of the easier ones to get 2 Diamond on. But then that's where the difference comes into play for the good players and like the people who are like just, you know, decently PvP knowledgeable. Those good players are the ones that are climbing high. They are the ones ranking up there. But the ones who aren't are just, you know, they're staying where they are. They're in the low 300 representation right now. And so there's a lot of them, and they are maybe a little class carried, but there's also just the fact that people have learned how to play against Starbreakers. Starbreaker doesn't really change between level 32 and level 60 in terms of what they do in PvP. So a lot of people have had time to learn how to fight against Starbreaker. They haven't had to adapt to any new play styles that are there. You know, Virus is here on the Starbreaker. He's close to a top 3 spot. But even then, there's a large gap between him and the next Starbreaker on this board. And so, you know, it's just one of those things that, you know, it would be nice to see, you know, the way people talk about Starbreaker, they should be how Gunner is. They should have significantly more overwhelming representation in those top 50 spots if they were as busted as people make them out to be. But I do still think Starbreaker is strong, but it's by no means nearly the monstrosity that people made it out to be in those first few days. I just think Starbreaker had probably the most complete kit at level 32 to 45 in those first few days when people saw ranking, as well as the fact that you know, it's a good kit. It is a noob stomper. I stand by that. Gunners and Starbreakers are absolute noob stompers. those are probably, if you want to go from plat to diamond without like too much difficulty, play Starbreaker and Gunner. Those two classes, and maybe even Elementalist. I don't play Elementalist, so I don't know how direct Elementalist plays, but I can tell you that Gunner and Starbreaker can definitely get through Platinum much more comfortably than a lot of other classes in comparison. And so, but it's once you get to the Diamond range, that's where you're going to start to see some resistance, and you're going to actually have to learn how to play a little more mind gamey rather than just taking advantage of what your class offers, except for maybe Gunners. Gunners maybe don't have to play as mind gamey because they're so protected and distance based. But Starbreaker, still good. But that is going to be your class representation for the top 300 at this time. And so keep in mind, this stuff is literally changing hour by hour. So what we're seeing right now and what we're talking about in this video quite possibly has already completely changed. So just keep that in mind. It's going to be interesting to see how this all shakes out in the end. But it's been a fun one, and it's been interesting to see overall. If you enjoyed the video and like our content, be sure to drop a like and subscribe. And if you want to talk to us live on Twitch, you can do so at twitch.tv/Zav. Take care. Have a good one.